listening live to Xtreme Classics over from the Extreme Movie Show. I'm Rob, your host. Guesting with me tonight is it Dr. Venkman, Dr. Venkmantine, or is it Classic Doctor or Dr. Classic? What the hell are we calling you these days, Doctor?
You can just call me sir, I guess, if you want to, and give me money.
Well, sir, if you need to fill any prescriptions, maybe after people watch this movie and listen to this stream, you might have a few people sign up. I see Dalton, the authenticator, is in here. Good evening, sir. How are you, Dalton? Hello. I hope you're doing well. Dalton,
Oh crap!
I
You
know you're
know what
the
that means, right?
authenticator, but I'm authenticating this particular stream because it's on the Extreme Classics. I am going to say this is the funniest movie of all time, Young Frankenstein by Mel Brooks. And so we're not here to even really talk about the movie. We're just talking about how damn funny it is and all the stupid scenes are in it, and see if people really, these days, from a millennial's perspective, even know what the hell it is. And so I want to start by asking you this, Doctor. Have you seen this film? And if so, has it been a while? Is it recent? How did you come across it?
It's been a while. I watched this back when I was in high school. I've been out of high school for about a couple number of years, even more than actually almost a decade now. But no, it's Mel Brooks, man. If it's a Mel Brooks movie, you know it's damn well gonna be funny.
Yeah, and it could
Cause you
not be
get
made
them.
today.
No, no, it could not. Um, what's that guy? The main guy who plays Igor.
Igor.
Igor Marty Feldman. Yeah, man.
So what about him? Go ahead, just talk.
If you would not have this guy in this movie, and you just had Gene Wilder, it wouldn't have been as funny. Because Marty Feldman brought in the great performance of Igor. I mean, like when they first meet, he's like, he's like, here, help me with these bags. He's like, okay, you get the blonde, I'll get the brunette. It's like, and he's fighting on to the lady's mink coat or scarf or
It's like it's
and he's just
attacking him.
and he's barking at it as he's ripping. I mean, this guy, he was born in like 1934 in East London. He has this distinctive look to him. You know, his eyes.
Yes.
He has really deep eye sockets, and it really helped out from the game to get certain types of roles, especially comedy. This isn't the only Mel Brooks movie he's been in. He's been in some other ones, you know. And he always either he plays the silent character, it's funny, you know, kind of like Carpel from the Grouch Brothers, or he plays the very standout characters like this by playing Igor. And then you combine that with Gene Wilder, it's like, dude, and Mel Brooks producing and directing it.
Yeah.
You know what damn well you're gonna be laughing. You basically need to bring an oxygen tank with you.
Yeah. This is a movie that, for me, I saw it when I was young with my father, who was a big Mel Brooks fan, and I remember. My father was one of those. It was the classic old fatherly type where he was strong, he was rugged, he was pretty silent, didn't wear his emotions out on his sleeves. It was a man's man kind of thing. Very soft spoken, not a lot of words, but when he said something, it meant something, and it was always, and aphorisms and cute little sayings. And so one night at a characters around Halloween, my brother and I were, playing around or something like that in the yard, and he said, "Boys, come here." And it was like, "Uh-oh, yes." And he's like, "I want you to go wash up. We're gonna have dinner, and Mom's going out shopping. We are going to sit down and watch a movie if you're good." We're like, "Okay." And we're like, "Well, what is it?" And he's like, "Don't worry about it." So we sat down, we watched this movie, and it's the only time I ever hardly remember my dad watching a movie just snickering and laughing because he was like a reactionless kind of guy. And to see him do that, my brother and I were just, I mean, we thought the movie was funny, but to see the reaction on my dad was absolutely insane. It was so incredible. And you're right. Gene Wilder and everybody else in this cast is fantastic. Now, chemistry is always the big thing. You can have five really talented people, but if they're not the right mix, you don't get the net benefit of all that working well together. Where somebody's like Gene Wilder can be so manic and calm, and then you could have somebody else play off of that in different ways. And that's the genius of this film. Is it's a bunch of scenes and set pieces. Obviously, it's a riff on Frankenstein, but to me, I can watch this movie now and still laugh out loud at all the scenes, knowing what's coming, everything about it, and it all revolves around Gene Wilder to me, and Marty Feldman too. It's pretty obvious physically. He played what he had for laughs. And of course, I think of the scene with Marty Feldman and them where he's going to, excuse me, pick up the doctor, and he says, I don't mean to sound brag, but I'm quite a world-renowned surgeon, and I can help you with that hump. And he's like, what hump? And just that's so stupid. But the timing of it, the fact that it's not obscene, it's not dirty, it's not whatever, it's just fantastic writing. And then later on, they play off that joke in a slightly different way, but not too much, where, you know, you know, Igor's kind of, moving around a little bit, and then halfway through, he's talking to him, and he's just kind of like looking at him while they're having a conversation, and he goes, "Wasn't your hump on the other side?" And he goes, "What hump?" And it was because he switched sides that his hump's on. And it's just, you get a lot of these dumb gags, you get all of these little setup things that reminds me of like old school classic comedy that's not, I don't know. It's so funny to me. All the people in it, all the scenes, all the writing. One of my favorite scenes is actually when he's sitting there, and the genius of him is just, no matter what role he's in, he goes from like 0 to 100, and it's a slow burn, and you just watch him go through all these stages. He just doesn't flip a switch and all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, I'm a crazy guy." He's like, "No,
I
my
know.
father's work was
Like
doo
when and like Dr. Frankenstein, he's like, "What knockers?" And he's like, "Oh, thank you, doctor."
Oh, thank you, doctor. Thank you. Yeah. Ooh. Roll, Lindsay. Hey. That's what I remember. It's just so stupid. And then, it's funny because too, as a kid watching it, you're trying to pay attention because it's hard to really watch a movie like this and catch everything the first time you see it. And I remember watching this a couple
I,
of years ago.
I know, and like,
I was going to say there's one scene that really sticks out to me where he's got Inga and he's got the doctor and he's taking him to the house and he's ha ha, and he's making the horses move faster and all that. Then all of a sudden you hear this werewolf. And then you hear it again, and she's like, "Ooh, what's that?" And he's like, "Werewolf." "What?" "Werewolf." And then you don't think about it, and I totally missed this as a kid. Igor says, "There, what? There, wolf." Like there's the wolf because they were saying, "Where's the wolf?" I mean, it's
the
so
one girl,
stupid.
the one girl Elizabeth in there. She's like, "Where are you going?" "Oh, you men are all alike. 7 or 8 quick ones, and then you're out. The boy supposed to break." After she slept with the monster.
Yeah, and then there's a really good scene there too, and actually it's I wouldn't even call it a visual gag, but like the monster, when he gets loose and he gets free, um, he sees the little girl playing, and of course, in the story, he drops her like down the well, and I think she dies, if I remember correctly, right? So it's kind of graphic, like you're like, "Oh gosh, this is supposed to be a comedy movie. They're really going to do it." And then Frankenstein looks at her, and then he turns and he breaks the fourth wall, and he just kind of looks at you for a split second, like, and that's it. Yeah, this is a family stream. Eric Breen is saying, absolutely right. We are a G-rated on the Xtreme Classics. So yeah, Young Frankenstein. Unfortunately, Mel Brooks, a year or so ago, was in a few interviews. I think he's close to 90 now. He's getting up there in age, but he talked about how the PC culture has destroyed everything. You can't make a movie like this today, and I haven't watched it in a couple years. I'll watch it here again soon, but it's one of my personal all-time favorites, no matter what genre we're talking. But it's kind of sad to sit there and say, we've got a couple people and some relatively newcomers like Terry Garr in here, where Mel Brooks was smart enough to say, "You know what, I've got a good group of people. I'm going to write this to their strengths, stay out of their way, and hopefully magic will happen and I can capture it." Because that's really the essence of good acting, good comedy, stuff that's really entertaining to us. It's not one shot and you're done. I mean, it's just, I can't think of a comedy at all recently that doesn't rely on juvenile stuff, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and or anybody that's that intense of a performer that can deliver the goods like Gene Wilder can. I mean, I thought he was fantastic um, in so many roles, but this one, when I think of Young Frankenstein, I just think of him, and I think of just how incredible this movie is. I just can't get over talking about how good it is. In addition to the fact that they filmed it in black and white, and they actually used the old sets and props from the original Frankenstein, which I thought was
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. And they had the 1930s opening credits, and they did the same kind of fade to black and all the stuff that they used to do in the old movies.
Yes, yes.
So But I mean, like, there's a scene where like Frankenstein or Frankenstein is like, for the experiment to be a success, all the body parts may be enlarged. And Igna's like, his veins, his feet, his hands, and organs would all have to be increased in size. And he's like, precisely. And her eyes go wide. He would have have enormous Schwankenstucker.
It's
He's
just
like,
like
that goes
woof.
without saying.
And what
uh,
I have to admit, it took me a while when I was younger watching Mel Brooks films. It took me getting older to appreciate how good Madeline Kahn is. Because of course she plays his girlfriend that like won't put out. He can't kiss her. He's got to watch the hair. She plays that role really, really well. And now that I'm older and I watch it, I get so annoyed at her because when I'm younger, I'm like, oh, they're supposed to get engaged, but we know he's going to hook up with Terry Garr because she's nice, and this one's a prude, and it's like. It's not done in a malicious way. It's just done in a matter of fact way, and in a way, it's kind of like a happy story because at the end, there's a twist, which I won't say for people that may not have seen it or haven't remembered it. But let's just say everybody winds up with the correct person they probably should be as this movie goes through. So you could say it's a love story, you could say it's a comedy, you could say a lot of different things. But frankly, it's just fun. I mean, it's
I,
enjoyable to watch. You leave with a smile on your
I mean,
face.
I mean, the other scene where they're in bed and she's like, she's asking him, something I've been aiming to ask you. In the transference, the monster got part of your wonderful brain. What do you get for him? And he's like, and he basically most suggestively approaches her in bed, and she's like, oh my goodness, I don't believe. And she's like, somewhat painful sounding moans and grunts, singing, oh sweet mystery of life. At least I found you. At last, I know the secret of it all.
No, I know that we talked about Key Largo on our first Extreme Classic because you had not really seen Humphrey Bogart. We're like, man, you've got to see that and check it out. So let me ask you this because you're the millennial, and I like to goof on you from that, but part of the Extreme Movie Show, since we have such a very young skewing audience, is to introduce people to movies maybe they haven't seen, maybe give it the perspective of somebody who came up in the generation, specifically say the 80s, that like Englantina and I cover when we do Top 10 Tuesdays. As a millennial, when you watch this film, do you think the average person, if they went out and saw it, that's a millennial, would understand half of it, or do you think they would be offended? What do you think their general reaction would be?
Well, it depends on your age group or how old you are. 10-year-old, maybe 11-year-old would probably get it more if you're 11 and up. But I think the general reaction, like now, like you said, certainly off stream, there's no way they could redo this movie without having being a picket and torches and all that stuff. People would not like this movie. Like, oh, it's horrible. You can't do this. It's very misogynist and stuff. Um, I don't think Hollywood would even try to make a movie like this. And if it did, it gets so much flack. Or it could backfire. Like, look at Joker. The media attacked it, and then it did. It's almost close to making over $1 billion now. So I mean, it very well could be made today. And today, it just depends on who would make it, and then who would get the stars. Because like I said, like this guy played Igor.
Marty Feldman. Yep.
Yeah, his distinctive look. They could, of course, they could do CG, do props, something like that. But that guy that was his real face. And that was part of the joke.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I wanted to mention about Mel Brooks. What I appreciate what he's done in his films, not just here with Young Frankenstein, but most of them, is, of course, he's got Gene Wilder in a lot of them. We know that, but I felt like he was smart enough to sit there and say, okay, I've got a good group of people. You see several of the same actors and actresses in several of his films. And very few people, I think, take their posse with them to do other things. But when it works and you've got that group, why not do it? And that's kind of how, old Hollywood used to be. You worked, got a weekly paycheck for a studio, and you made with pretty much what they told you to make. They put you on loan to other places, and things would work out. Oh, you're Humphrey Bogart. You got this kind of lispy looking thing with your face. We're going to cast you as a heavy guy, as a bad guy. Well, with his personality, the way he carried himself on screen, it turned out to be great as a detective, and boom, you got great success. But the genius in the casting is, like I say, is let people do what they're good, let them play to their strengths, and kind of get out of their way. And I'm going to use Cloris Leachman as an example. Know nothing about her, know nothing about her talent, which a lot of stuff what she's been in. I just go, wow, she's got the over-the-top accent. She does the thing where she says and repeats everything like 3 or 4 times to the doctor. That's her shtick running through. That's her gimmick, and you know it. So when she's walking up the stairs with the candles, and she stops every couple of seconds, and she's like, "Follow me." Right this way. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But then later on, when she like, with the doctor is basically saying goodnight, and she's like, would the doctor like some brandy? a glass of warm milk, perhaps. And he's like, no, get out of here. And you see him, like I said before with Gene, his genius is going from 0 to 100 in about 1,000 steps,
Well,
and you can
yeah,
almost measure it. And it's just a beauty to watch this slow eruption come up. And so she's pegged really great in that scene to play off of that, or the goofiness, the airheadedness of the blonde in here. When they find the secret passage. And he's like, put the candle back. And he's like, now this way, that one. You're like, okay, this is kind of silly or like that. Then she goes through, and then what does she say? Put the candle back. I mean, it's coming. It takes 5 minutes, but it's funny. And I cannot think of
yeah.
an honest to goodness movie
Uh,
that you could watch when you're 6, 7, 8 years
I
old or now, and it's still going to be awesome. This is by far one of the best movies of all time.
I mean, Igor, he's like, I'll never forget my old dad. When these things would happen to him, the things he'd say to me, and like Frankenstein's like, well, what did he say? He's like, what the hell are you doing in the bathroom all day and all night? Why don't you get out here? Someone else give a chance.
so, so unrelated. Like he was abused or something. Everybody today would go crazy at that scene, talking about that's not fair. You're using this guy's, and it's like, oh, shut up. Enjoy the damn movie. And the one I like too is it's real cynical. Is when they're deciding that they got to dig up a body, and so they go out there, and it's really tough work, and they're sweating, and I think there's like a dissolve or a cut, and it comes back, and they're like finished up. It's like, God, can't think of
Uh,
anything worse. It's like, could be worse. How? Could be raining, and then instantly it starts raining.
I mean, there's so many great scenes where or Ignat's like werewolf, and he's like werewolf there, and he's like what? There, wolf, there, castle. And he's like, why are you talking that way? I thought you wanted to. No, I don't want to. Suit yourself. I'm easy.
Dalton's bringing up a statement in channel, of
Uh,
course, meant to troll me, I think, but he says controversial opinion. Gene Wilder is the worst part of this movie. Um, I guess Dalton, the first thing I would ask you is why is it the worst, and what are you measuring it to? How are you defining best to worst? I agree that Gene Wilder is an acquired taste, and that if you don't know his shtick the first time or two you see it, may be a bit off-putting. And there's certainly not a lot of manic type comedians like him. But for me, the difference is he was one of the earlier ones that have done this kind of shtick, but that's how he is. Um, a lot of the manic type people like Chris Farley, they're just manic because they're coked out, aren't really that funny. They may have the fake enthusiasm because of drugs or not or whatever. That's fine, but just not funny at all. It just I don't know if it's because I always picture Gene Wilder as somebody who's actually a sensitive person, really really intelligent. He's got sparkle in his eyes. There's something there. I don't know. Maybe
I
talent. I don't know what you would call it, but the only person that can come close to this level of intensity, and certainly doesn't, I think, even have the timing necessarily or the subtlety, is Jim Carrey. And Jim Carrey, I don't know if he could do this. I don't. I think he's at the age now where he's just so hurtful and angry about things that I don't know if we'll ever see him in anything. And again, that being said, Carrey's done some wonderful things, but I cannot think of another entertainer even close to this, and not any comedian in
uh,
any movie that's been mildly entertaining on a comedy level the past 10, 20 years. No way
I
anybody
mean,
compares to Gene Wilder.
I love Gene Wilder. He said how he goes from like 0 to 60 with like as far as his emotions. Look at in Willy Wonka when they went into the tunnel on the boats, and you see he just started getting like acting crazy. It's like, and I love it when he does that. It's like his voice, the way he does it, everything he does, you feel it, the emotion, like you're right there. You're right along with him.
Yeah,
In this too, like he does the same thing.
and, and
He
he and he knows he's only doing it a couple times a movie. So you
Yeah,
let the other players shine. It just he happens to be the central character everything revolves around. He's the stupid guy that basically ends up getting the girl and figuring things out too. And it's fun to watch. It's a comedy.
oh,
Now somebody said romantic comedy. The thing we had talked about before is to me there's no such thing as a horror comedy. Either you're a comedy or a horror. You're one or the other. And then the other thing is just the field that you're in. So is something sci-fi? Well, it may have horror elements. It may have this. It may have that. I think you have to define it. One's the noun, one's the verb. This is a
well,
comedy. Period.
I wouldn't. Yeah, horror comedy. I'd be say like like a comedy gore, a dark comedy. You call it that. You don't call it horror.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Like Evil Dead and all this stuff. That's a dark comedy. It's not horror.
Right.
It's horror. The first movie would be considered horror. The first Evil Dead. because there's no comedy in it whatsoever.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you could say that the first one's a horror, the second or third one's a comedy. Sure, absolutely, you could say that. And
Yeah.
Dalton's answering the question about about Wilder being the worst part, where he says he always rubs me the wrong way. He reminds me of Will Ferrell from Elf. I get it because Will Ferrell's hit or miss to me with a lot of misses. I think he can be kind of a likable guy, but the only thing about Will Ferrell is that I think he tries to do a lot of stuff, and I know he'll admit that he's made some turds, but some things he does, I think the ideas are better than the execution, and so part of me thinks that's funny. But his shtick does get old too. And Wilder, like I said, I did say he was an acquired taste. Um, I think he really had a specific take on how he wanted to play certain things and knew that going in. And we're talking here about Young Frankenstein. Um, I like how he just says, "Yeah, that was my dad," and yeah, I'm not my dad, and just like everything else, the sins of the father come back to tempt you, and also maybe it's something having to do with fate if you believe in those things. But yeah, overall, just an absolutely timeless movie. It's one of those ones that you could put in the vault and watch it, wouldn't get old. I just, the one thing I was asking about earlier about millennials watching it today, would they get a lot of the jokes? Do you think a lot of younger people have actually seen a lot of the older classics where they can appreciate the fact that it's black and white and the set pieces and the way people dressed? Or do you think all that would be lost on today's generation?
It depends on the person. Like, like my niece, she's like 16 years old. She likes certain movies, but then like she doesn't like The Princess Bride. Doesn't care for it.
Me
She's
either.
not into that stuff. She'd rather watch the movie It.
Right.
She's more into horror.
Hmm.
But as far as black and white stuff, I'm not really sure if she'd really appreciate sit down. There's a lot of things she will not. She hears the idea and she will not even give it a try. She'll not, so sit down and be like, nope, I don't even care about it. She'll walk to leave the other room. I can understand it because I'm like that too sometimes. I know there's some things like I can never watch Captain Marvel, not even for a review. I just don't see the point of wasting 2 hours of my life for that.
Wow. Yeah, it's like that for me too. And you mentioned Joker earlier right now over the half billion mark. I haven't seen it. Maybe I'll probably see it at one day. I don't mind watching dark stuff or serious stuff. I don't like it when stuff panders or celebrates anything in particular if it's not necessarily positive sometimes. But obviously there's an interest in seeing it, so the hype was drummed up well. I've still yet to see one reviewer that says this is good because dot dot dot, and they gave me a reason. This movie, we didn't even really go through it. We just talked about some of the funny scenes, why some of the characters are funny, how it all kind of works together, and it's very superficial. So I wouldn't even call this a deep dive extreme review. We'll save that for like a live stream um, sometime. But this movie, if somebody said what comedy comes to mind that you would recommend out of all the movies you like, don't like, that you would say that somebody needs to see before they die, this is number one. I'd have to think hard
I would.
about what would be number two, but this, a long
Uh,
time
I
coming.
can. My personal number two would be either the Monty Python Holy Grail or seeing Men in Tights, Robin Hood
Which is
with
also
Terry
Mel
Hughes.
Brooks.
Yes.
So you've got the British humor versus the American, I'll say, I don't know if I can say this on the stream. Mel Brooks is a particular religious ethnicity, and he makes fun of that in his movies. So if you get that, you understand what I'm saying. If not, don't worry about it. You won't miss it while you're watching this movie. So yeah,
I
Young
mean, Men in
Frankenstein,
Tights. Yeah, Men in Tights would be considered racist today. The Robin Hood Men
Blazing
in Tights.
Saddles, yeah,
Yeah, all that stuff.
yeah. Man, just
But
that's unfortunate.
they're great movies though. If you take yourself out of the whole politics, and just sit there and watch it, without having opinion first, form your opinion afterwards. Most people they look at a movie like they'll form opinion beforehand. I've, so I've seen parts of Captain Marvel, and I just couldn't get into it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And this is a movie, Young Frankenstein, that when you sit down and you start watching it, if you haven't seen Frankenstein, it's okay. You don't need to have seen all the classic Universal horror movies, or say if you're like me, a big fan of the Hammer films that kind of redid their own because the stuff was in the public domain, like say in the 50s and 60s with Christopher Lee, which we may be covering here soon too. You don't have to see any of that stuff. You don't have to know that there's going to be a secret passageway in a room in a castle because you kind of know what that thing is anyway from that. So this movie still has a lot of things that you can watch it
Well,
and just from the get go, and just like you said, sit down, watch it, and enjoy it. You don't have to have a backstory on anything.
You know what I want to know where I learned about Secret Passageway? Scooby Doo.
Oh boy,
That's where I learned about all the tropes and stuff. It's from watching Scooby Doo back in the day. So then when I
wow.
watched young Saddles, I'm like, I knew exactly. Oh, the candle's gonna do something. Put the candle.
Put the Kendall
So
back. Yeah, I believe YouTube has this movie for free, but I'm not sure if the quality it would be considered acceptable in terms of watching it for those of you interested. Young Frankenstein can be found typically almost all the time on one of the major ones, whether it's Prime or Netflix. To be honest, I haven't looked lately, but it's always on TV. This is one of the few movies that I actually have a copy of myself. We used to do on our Oscar nights, like Top 10 Tuesday with Eglinton, we used to do these um, bets and wagers, and I won Young Frankenstein, and one of them like, yeah, I'm a big winner. I don't care if you got more right than I did. I got the best damn movie. So a lot of fun. Young Frankenstein. All I'm going to simply say is, for my final thoughts before I turn it over to the doctor, is go see this film. It literally is a lot of fun. It'll put a smile on your face. It's lighthearted. You walk away happy. Doctor, final thoughts.
don't be like Igor. Do not spend your days in the bathroom. Also, go see this movie. Take a chance at it. Even if it looks stupid to you, watch it. Get all the way through it. Don't be one of those people who are like, I don't want to watch it. It looks dumb, And then actually, when you sit down and watch it, it could be something that you actually like, enjoy,
Or
or
if you
wait a few
consider
years.
yourself a serious cinephile, you can watch and compare and contrast the style of comedy acting from then versus today, and how
Yeah,
things have changed and how they've progressed in the way of media. Blah 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 blah.
yeah. There's a lot of stuff that me and Rob and Ingleton we've all watched, and then we're younger and go back and watch it again, and then we have a different opinion. We may like something back then and may hate it now. You know, it's your perspective and how your Pacific lifestyle. If you and the dog approves of it.
Daisy and Max obviously have an intruder. It must be Frankenstein's monster here on the Pinehurst Palace. They're roaming the grounds freely, so I need to take care of this and address this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, stay extreme. Have a good night. Enjoy the movie. Doctor, I'll be back in 5. Take care, everybody. Top 10 Tuesday or a surprise stream coming up shortly. Good night, everyone.
Good night.